A wild and hilarious chase for a fortune of jewels. Tonight's film, 1970s, The 12 Chairs. Welcome back to Entertainment Rebooted, specifically Cinema Revisited, Mel Brooks. We are going through and we are watching the majority of the movies directed, produced, written by the extremely famous, once-in-a-generation filmmaker, Mel Brooks. Tonight's film was his second film, The 12 Chairs. With me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, DJ. Say hi, DJ.
Hello.
All right, DJ, we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, the iconic, and maybe even talking a little bit about what we would do to release for a modern audience. The 12 Chairs, 1970. Take it away with a plot summary.
So, The 12 Chairs is a Russian satirical novel that was written in 1929, I believe. This is an adaptation of that. It is meant to be humorous as well as a satire of the culture of Soviet Union, the people, everything. Happens about 30 years after the revolution, I think, is when it took place.
If it was written in 29, it would have taken place about 12, 13 years after the revolution.
I think the book did, but the movie itself, I think, is 30 years after.
The movie?
The film. I think he said it was 30 years ago or 25 years or something like that.
They
They actually say in the film like exactly how long it's been since the revolution, but I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, this takes place several years after the revolution. And old Marshal, a member of the nobility, his mother-in-law is dying, and he finds out that she had sewed a large portion of her fortune, jewels, and everything into a chair that was a set of 12 chairs and a dining room set that was taken away during the revolution. And so he goes on a chase for them, meets a con man that's gets in on the plot, and a priest becomes the rival, and they are all competing over the chairs. And that it's just the hilarity ensues is just they're literally going all over Russia to find these things, and everything keeps breaking up. They constantly find chairs a few at a time, but they never can get a hold of all of them at once. They find 1 to 3 different pieces and all over the country on ships and other places. The priest gets waylaid into Siberia, and it's just a lot of like wacky happenstance, only for them to find out that by the time they find the chair, the jewels had already been found and were used for the community center that they had opened up. And it's kind of like a hilariously hope thing, but there's like the depression involved and a lot of like introspection, especially between the two main characters. And it just kind of goes on to be kind of a bittersweet ending where they realize that now the treasure's gone. They just kind of move on, and that's it. That's the film. The bits we'll go over in like the good, the bad, the iconic, but that's the summary synopsis of the film.
Nice. All right, let's get into it then. The good. What's good about this film?
One of the things that like Mel Brooks is known for is his gag humor. I think we talked about this a little bit in the producers. There's a lot of that in this, but this film has a lot more like very poignant satirical humor. Like a lot of the humor in this is in the background, and that's just really good. Like the scenery, the signs in the background. There's all these signs everywhere about like one of the favorite things is like they have a street, it's crossed out, and then it says Vladimir Lenin's Boulevard.
It's Lenin, Stalin, and they crossed out Trotsky.
Yeah, crossed out Trotsky. Yeah. There's
the Bureau of Bureaus.
The Bureau of, when they go to find the furniture, there's all these bureaus on top of bureaus of bureaus. Like the mockery of the bureaucracy and the sheer amount of just like paperwork and the tracking and everything. It's it's just good. Like, just solid. Just good background, clever little placement humor.
Yeah.
Enjoyed the heck out of that. Just the foreground stuff is fun, but just that little extra in the background was a the more you see of it, the more you look for it, and the better it gets. That was like really good to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was definitely really good. I think another thing that the film deserves kudos for, I think it's just the set design and also the character design, like the costume work and stuff like that. You can kind of tell that they cut a little bit of corners, and it's not made on like the most extravagant budget. You can kind of tell that just by looking at all the actors and stuff, but they do a really good job of making you feel like they are actually going across Europe. They're going across Russia.
Yeah.
Variety of different locations and stuff like that. But even like the first scene, the makeup work that they have on the mother-in-law is very impressive. She looks very sickly, but also it brings attention to her eyes, which is where the majority of her humor is.
Yeah.
It's just her looks.
The eye movements were just glorious. She's like, do this.
Yeah.
That's good.
So it's really it just deserves to be pointed out that, you know, the makeup work, the costume work, the set work is all really good. It all plays very, very well, and it's very subtle, but it brings attention to the subtle thing that Brooks once put into the forefront.
Right.
Because if they didn't overemphasize her eyes, you wouldn't be like, oh, she's sickly, but also you wouldn't be looking at how big her eyes are getting. You know, it's things like that. So I think that just, I had a similar thing with the producers, didn't I? Where I said like the set designs were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do a really good job of, you can tell because they're not doing a lot of like wide shots. Like you think of like a movie like Ben-Hur, where you can tell they put a lot of production budget into that film like that. This does a lot with very little. The shots are up close. You can tell they're trying to keep things to a certain zone because they probably don't have much past that set they built. Like
right.
The set's this, and everything past that's like production. They try to keep everything close in and neat and tight because you can tell they just don't have the expanse that other films would have had. But much like films like Monty Python and other things, they do a lot with very little in this film. They do a very good job of keeping things looking like they do. They do a really good job of building sets and scenes and costumes without having to really go too extravagant on it.
Right.
It's impressive what they're able to pull off.
Yeah, definitely. Like the entire film in and of itself is very impressive with its design. So,
right.
It's not quite iconic, but it's definitely good. It deserves to be pointed out. How about bad?
For me, the one thing that kind of took it out is the pacing in the first half of the film. Mm-hmm. And I get slow burn, but it takes a long time to get to the point, and there's a lot of physical humor in the beginning, so it kind of detracts from what's so great about the rest of the film. Like, pretty much the first 30 minutes is a lot of physical humor and very slow getting to the point. Mm-hmm. But once it starts moving, it's just great. But I watched the first, like, I almost lost this film. Like, I'm watching the beginning of it, like, I'm not sure this is really what I'm going to be into. Yeah. Like, you get a little bit of Mel Brooks' humor in there and stuff, but it just isn't quite, but you get that scenic humor, like the signs, but not as, that's about it. But then it just like turns a corner and just moves for the rest of the film. So that was me, just a really slow burn on the start. Yeah, a little too slow.
Yeah, yeah. The beginning is rough, for sure. Like pacing wise, humor wise, and even like setting up the story gets a little bit muddled at the beginning. So it gets kind of hard to follow, and then as the story progresses, I think that I'll add on to that too is just pacing in general. This film feels very long. Like it starts to feel very long after a while.
I agree with that. Well, also, and to add to that too, not just in the beginning, but there are weird cuts where you get lost on the timing sometimes. Where there are moments where they're doing something and then it cuts and then they're like an entirely different city, and you're like, whoa, what did I just miss? Like,
well, it's a different city, and then also it's a tonal shift.
yes,
Like there's, and it has a tonal shift on a very odd note that doesn't have a lot of carryover. You feel like it's been a while, so
it suffers from a similar thing. We did this with the original 1932 Dracula, where it feels like they were just trying to conserve film, and so there's just weird cutting.
Yeah.
This feels like to that again, where it's like you see a perfect moment for them to cut, but the scene goes a little too much longer, and then it cuts, and you're like, they'll say, we need to go to this city. Oh yeah. And then there's like 30 more seconds of something happening, and then they cut to that city, almost enough to give you enough time to forget what they just said.
Right.
It's like, why didn't you cut? In a lot of films in the era, they would have cut right there.
Yeah.
To that city.
Or they'd have panned.
Oh, they panned.
Sweep. Yeah.
Yes, but there's a lot of these moments where they don't do that, and they linger a little too long, and then switch, or they switch to the other character. Like when they switch from the main cast over to the priest, yeah, and then back. You get a little jarring sometimes because you don't realize who you're following at that moment. That gets a little rough, and especially one of the worst cuts in the film is when it goes from him in Siberia to the other crew, and then back to them on the island. And I completely lost track of what was going on.
Yeah.
I actually had to ask you, like, vocally, wait, whoa, who's where? Like, I lost track of what's going on.
Well, and also you were away from.
So
sometimes you're away from these characters long enough that you really kind of forget, and then it has a carryover joke.
Yes.
Like when the father's reintroduced, it's the same couple, and he followed the couple, and the couple explains how they ended up on this tropical area. But then the introduction of the priest, he just starts going 104, 105, and it's callback to a joke that was happening at that point. It had to have been at least 10 minutes of film.
Exactly.
So I recalled it, but you were really confused. You were like, why is he like counting?
Got it, exactly.
Yeah, and it's just like because when he was getting kicked out of the door, and it's also a thing of like he was getting kicked out of the door, and it was like in the background that he was.
Yeah, I caught the I didn't make the connection, and it's just like I feel like that is partly an audience thing. That's but if you wait too long, you're gonna get what we got. You're gonna get a split audience where half of them follow along and the other half loses what's going on.
Yeah.
And so throughout the whole film, and it's never consistent. So there's like gonna be. I remember there was a part where you were confused and I followed. So you're gonna have these moments where like, if you're not just like hyped into it, like you're gonna miss something really important, and then like another audience member gets it, and so yeah, that can get a little rough sometimes.
Yeah.
It's clever, but it's also nauseating a little bit when you overuse it, and it gets used throughout the entire film. Yeah. You can do that like here or there, and it becomes like a joke within a joke. But if your whole movie is like that, you just get lost. And that's where I was. Like the beginning was slow, and then it started to pick up speed so fast, I started to get lost in the moment. And then it slows down towards the ending again. It gives me a little time to like process. It's not horrible. It's just enough to like make it a little messy and confusing.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's the bad. How about ugly? I actually have an ugly that's related to your bad. The ugly for me is like, okay, so when we talk about ugly and iconic, essentially it's if you're talking to a friend about this, if they're going to talk about watching it, or if you're trying to encourage them to watch it, what's the ugly thing? What's the thing that you warn them about?
What's the thing that stands out, and what's the thing that stands out, good and bad, like the thing that makes or breaks this film. Exactly.
So it's kind of like the thing of when you're recommending a movie, if you're like, hey, check out 12 Chairs by Mel Brooks, and the iconic is this is why you watch it. The ugly is the thing that you kind of warn about, and you're like, hey, like if you're prepared for this, just be aware that this happens.
Right.
So I like to clarify, like that's the difference between like good, bad, ugly, iconic.
When we originally started, a lot of it was too like what made it stand out for its time, and that's important too. But really, yeah, it's in encapsulation is what makes this thing stand out from other films or from whatever makes it different or unique. Would be both good and bad.
Right. So the thing that I would warn people about when it comes to this film is the beginning is very, very, very rough. I don't think that the movie really picks up and gets interesting and entertaining until after they leave the servant's house, like the servant's area.
Yes.
It's very, I hate to say it, the ugly in this film is Mel Brooks's character.
Yep.
That whole scene with Mel Brooks's character, I literally was relieved when his character was gone. And I hate to say it, it's like, I love when Mel Brooks is in his movies.
Well,
but
it's over the top.
Yeah, this one was over the top. It was really hard to follow. And it also it was not very entertaining. His humor was not, it wasn't typical Mel Brooks humor, like his witty dialogue. It was all physical.
He gives a really good, like, opening joke, and his character's really interesting until the master shows up, and then it just deteriorates.
And it feels very grovelly. He's very groveling. He's very grating.
Yes.
Is the other thing, too. Like, he grovels, and it becomes grating.
It's just over the top.
And it's the ugly part because it's probably about 20 minutes of the film, and it's like the first 20, 25, 30 minutes of the film is really, really hard to watch. But once you get past that servant, it starts getting a little bit more engaging and a little bit more interesting. It's just a thing of like, hey, be prepared. Like, you need to pay attention enough to know what's going on, but this film does get better. It just
there are also
really
good
rough.
parts in the beginning. It's just I think they stand out more too because of that. Like in the beginning, the jokes stand out really strong because it's against a really boring, slow backdrop.
Yeah.
But once the film picks up, the jokes and the situational humor mash together really well.
And then it starts feeling like a Mel Brooks
Then
movie.
it starts feeling like a Mel Brooks film. The first 20 minutes of the film just feels like an old comedy film. Like in general, it doesn't feel like doesn't feel that uniqueness until later. It's slow burn.
So that would be what I would say is ugly about this movie. How about you, DJ?
I would actually add on to that because I agree. The ugly is that first bit. But I will say character interactions in general in the beginning of the film are odd. The priest has a lot of physical comedy, not a lot of like you get what he's doing, but there's one of the things I really enjoy in Mel Brooks' film is witty dialogue.
Yeah.
He has a lot of witty dialogue. And I always mean like one-liners or back and forth witty dialogue.
Yeah, it feels natural, but everything they're saying is hilarious.
Like the producers, the one we just watched before this, the opening scene where the two of them are going back and forth is good dialogue, and there's a little bit of physical and situational humor mixed in, but the dialogue is consistent. The beginning of this film, there's large portions of physical with very little dialogue going on.
Yeah, and
you get to the point where he goes in to see his aunt or his mother-in-law, sorry. And there's that good, like he's on her and she's like doing the eyeball thing. And that's great. But then for everything before and after that for a good while is just kind of boring and slow until the con man gets in there. And you start to get a little bit of their dynamic, but when it really starts to build is when those two have dialogue back and forth throughout the rest of their travels. Yeah. When they're actually a team and they're going back and forth and you're getting their situations with other people and other characters and the things they're doing, it really picks up. Yeah. Mel Brooks, that's really my ugly is that all the character interactions early on add on to that. And like you said, Mel Brooks' character detracts from those two building a repertoire. You're trying to see these two it almost feels like he's going to be a main character.
Right.
And then he isn't. And I feel like if he had been, maybe he would have been less grating over time because they could have done more with him. But because he shows up, detracts from the two main characters becoming a team
Yeah.
He pulls away from that, and you don't get it until he's gone, and then you get to see those two in their prime.
Yeah.
That just hurts it really bad.
Well, it also, like, the thing is that it's very noticeable that the characters work really well together, because there's a break with Mel Brooks' character where literally the con man hands him a ruble and goes, hey, go, I think there's vodka or something like that. Like, go, here's a ruble, get some vodka, come back later. And then they have, like, good back and forth dialogue, and it's very interesting, and it's entertaining, and how
and then he comes
they're
back.
establishing their relationship. Yeah, and then he comes back, and it's just like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, just basically all the character interactions that aren't the two leads, just pull away from them building the relationship. I feel like they should have given them more time to build on their own early on with less distraction. Well, they would have given it more. But for the rest of the film, it's pretty solid.
Yeah. All right, how about iconic?
For me, out of this film, what stands out above all else is the two leads, like, general chemistry. This film does a really good job of taking a kind of an absurd premise. It's a treasure hunt in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of hilarious on its face. But the two main characters take this very seriously. The part of the joke is how serious these two are about this chase.
Yeah.
And all the situations happening to them are funny and stuff, but they're committed to the cause. And there's several times where they fall out with each other, or they have disagreements in how things go. Two big moments in the film for me is the boat scene when he's paddling off without him, and he's begging him to take him with him, and then they're cold, and the guy gives him his coat. This is a con man who's grown up his whole life begging for a living, and he's showing mercy to someone that used to be part of the rich class. Like, they're both at their lowest, and they feel for each other. And the other moment is a two-part, when he fakes the seizure and then does it again on his own later, because his pride, like, won't let him do it, and he finally does it, and then he's like, after we get the chair, I don't want anything to do with you. Yeah. But the funny thing is, the entire film, you're trying to find old jewelry from somebody else. You're still basically begging.
Right.
You're just doing it through a more authorized channel. Like, it's okay for me to beg if I'm just taking money from another rich person.
Well, yeah, and I'm taking the money from
exactly.
It's my in-laws. It's mine.
Yeah, What really separates these two people is a history of, like, how they lived before. But other than that, they're in the same situation. They're both basically having to survive off of someone else's gains.
Yeah,
and this pride that he has, kind of, you see it break at the end of the film. Like, he realizes that he has to do what he has to do to survive, and they learn from each other a little bit.
Right.
And it's just a really great chemistry throughout the film. And a lot of films with two leads like this just stand out because it's not done very often, where you get two really strong male leads that have a lot of difference, that build that repertoire together.
Right.
This is what makes, I think, a Blue Collar is one of the few things I can think of in modern times that was able to do this. You had an FBI agent, somebody else. You get these people from very different livelihoods, and you put them together, and you see them mold each other a little bit, pull each other a little bit, and they learn things from each other. But they never compromise who they are completely, but they learn to be better. And in a comedy, especially, like, the way they do it, it's really good. It's just solid. It stands out, and it made the film incredibly enjoyable, and it makes it timeless.
Yeah. Yeah. Going on with that, I mean, their chemistry is great. The two main characters are absolutely great. That is really the part that drives the entire film. Luckily, it is the movie, so it is like the the most important part to have, and it has that, which is why the movie itself is better because of it.
Yes. Well, because you think of the premise on its own. There's 1,000 ways that this plot would fall apart. And honestly, I've not seen it. This is one of those things we would have put on our lists. That's like a book that would make an absurd film.
Yeah.
Like, the premise just doesn't feel like it would work in film. But these guys make it work.
Yeah.
By making it believable. Like, the amount of passion they put into this, it just makes it work.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing, too, is like Mel Brooks takes it and he does make it work. It works as a film. Is it his best movie? No, it's not his best movie. But it's good.
But it's still
good.
You can also see it's where he gets his start.
Yeah.
Like, the producers, you see a lot of that Mel Brooks humor in it. But what you get out of this one is you get that really strong main character. Like, one of the things that he does well in all his films, even the ones he's parodying other films, but his leads always are strong.
That's true.
Carrie Elwes in Robin Hood Men in Tights is strong. Blazing Saddles and Spaceballs. The leads are really strong characters, even though they're parodies of other characters.
Right.
And the producers, I didn't get that out of as much. I got the good witty banter, that kind of stuff, but this is the first time I feel the Mel Brooks main leads, the strong chemistry between the leads.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, the iconic for me is actually the priest character. He is probably the first 100% pure Mel Brooks character. He has the witty dialogue, he has the jokes, he has the cadence, and he has kind of the way that he walks, the way that he moves, the way that he does everything is what we have come to expect of Mel Brooks. It feels like when he's talking and he's communicating, he feels like you could pick him up, that character, you could pick him up and you could put him in Spaceballs and he would still kind of work. You could pick him up and you could put him in Robin Hood Men in Tights and he would still kind of fit in. He felt very much like a Mel Brooks character.
Yeah.
Even the main lead, the Lord guy, the guy who used to be rich. The Marshal. That's what it is. Even the Marshal comes off as very cartoony, which is not really Mel Brooks. Like, he comes off like purposely like he's a cartoon. Whereas the priest, his whole character is like, he's doing ridiculous things. He's doing kind of cartoony things. But the way that he's playing it off feels just like a Mel Brooks character. So that's what I would say. It's like, I think that he's iconic because he's probably the first character that Mel Brooks 100% was able to do his humor on and see if he worked.
That's true.
So he put him in
he
the
works,
background.
And he is exactly what Mel Brooks's character, the one he played, isn't.
Yes.
Mel Brooks's character that he plays is a character that comes in as a side character and detracts from what's going on.
Yep.
The priest adds significantly to what's going on.
Yeah.
And his interactions with the leads are fantastic.
Yeah. And he has great interactions with the leads, but he doesn't need to have the leads in order to work.
No.
And the thing too
there's
is
whole
like,
sections of the film where they're not there and he's on his own and it works.
Yeah, and his scenes are all hilarious. And the other thing is that he has like an intro song. He's a character with an intro song. Like anytime he appears, they play he's there. And he has recurring jokes, and he has jokes that kind of move on throughout the entire movie. Like I said, he's a Mel Brooks character. He feels like a Mel Brooks character.
That's actually one of the things that Mel Brooks was good with is in a lot of his films, the Mel Brooks characters aren't usually the leads. They're usually a sidekick or some kind of like I know we're not there yet, but in Spaceballs it's Worf, the dog. He's the Mel Brooks character. Barf, that's the name. Barf. He's a Mel Brooks character.
Yeah.
You know, those are the guys that like make the film stand out. But there's more of them. We'll get to it later, but in Spaceballs there's several. This one, the priest, was really... You're right. He's the only one in this entire film. This film feels like he read this book and like, I can make this satire. I can make this.
Yeah.
And he made this in, and he got one of his characters in there, and it was the priest.
Yep.
Because I mean, what's funnier than a priest that's like chasing after treasure in the Soviet Union? Like, that's a funny, hilarious premise.
Well, and
I can do whatever I want with this guy.
well, and that's the thing too, is like he also plays it off, and it's just 100% like the character is there for the story, but he works in the story. Like, he literally, one of the first lines is that he's a priest, so he always says things that are kind of priesty, and he acts kind of priesty. But the thing is that when he's trying to get a personal possession, he starts trying to lecture the dude on how he's not being a good comrade.
Right.
And then he's like, but to be a part of the party, you have to be an atheist. And he just goes, well, the church has to adopt to the times. Like, he just makes excuses for himself to continue doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that, like I said, like, his jokes really work because he does like a subtle little thing. He just says a subtle little thing, and then it works really well.
Yeah.
Later on.
He also, not only that, but he has subtle and non-subtle jokes.
Yeah.
How these little subtle references and jokes and straight jokes, as well as punchlines and fault lines. He's got all, it's like 4 layers of comedy with that character.
Yeah.
Whereas the leads only have the 2. They have like the physical and then the banter
they
comedy.
do the slapstick, and then they have the comedy between the 2.
Yeah.
Very rarely do they actually make like an observational
Yes.
comment. Sometimes the con man does. The con man's the straight man. He sees the ridiculousness going around him and he points it out. That's kind of the character trope he has. Whereas the
Marshall,
I don't know why I keep forgetting. The Marshal, his comedy trope is he is the cartoon character. He's Wile E. Coyote. That's what he is. He's Wile E. Coyote. He goes and he flips off the you know, not flips off, but you know what I mean. Like he gets into a fit of rage.
Yes,
that's what I mean. Like that's what I meant.
He's an
like,
over the top. He's not, rather than a mustache twirling villain, he's like an opportunist that just can't. He's over the top in his like obsession and greed. Yeah. Whereas the con man is a lot more calm and natured. The priest splits the difference between those two by being kind of an absurd character that's almost comical, but he's earnest.
Yeah.
And so the 3 of them have very different motivations. They all want the same thing. They all want the treasure, but they all have very different ways of going about it, and they all stand out in good contrast. And I feel like this honestly feels like both the writer and like Mel Brooks like looked at this and went,
well, the writer was Mel Brooks.
Well, I meant the writer of the book.
Oh, okay.
So like the author of the book went and goes, wow, these 2 characters work together, but there's something missing, and then invented the priest to give them a foil.
Yeah.
Like, because this movie, if you took the priest out, wouldn't be as much fun. That counter to them, like the con man owns what he is.
Yeah.
I'm just begging. I've always done this. This is me. Yep. And his foil, the Marshal, is I've always done this. I've been living off of other people. They're the same person.
Yeah.
It's just one was born into wealth and one wasn't, but they're both
one had
beggars.
The silver spoon, one had a scrounge for a spoon.
But they're both beggars. Yeah. Whereas the priest is an entirely different character.
Yep.
He is someone who has been pious his whole life and now decided that he deserves something for himself.
Yeah.
He has changed. The other 2 are just following the nature they've always had. He's the only one that's changed.
Yep.
Whereas at the end of it, the priest becomes more and more like them, and they become less and less like themselves.
Right.
And that's a fun contrast. That doesn't work. I think our 2 iconics work really well together because yours is the priest standing out, mine is the 2 characters, and they foil each other really well.
Yeah. But I think all the characters ultimately are the iconic. Okay, so do we want to go into, like, if you had to remake this film for a modern audience?
It's a little harder because this one's a little more modernly made, but I would say something. So for this, I think what I would do is just say something that I think I would fix to clean it up would be to, out of everything we've said, just cut it better. Like, take the film, whatever you guys did, just like recut it a little smoother, because I feel like that's what I would like. If I could change only one thing, I would recut it. And the funny thing is the film that we watched, you wouldn't even have to find the original footage, because a lot of the cuts just need to actually be cut sooner.
Yeah.
Take sections of the film and cut them a few seconds or a few minutes sooner than they did, to where it flows a little more naturally, and that probably would save this film a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
There's a little section at the beginning that could be cut a little shorter, and then just cut the in between moments, especially when they're switching between the priest and the other two characters. There's some areas there where they could cut a little sooner, and it would just significantly smooth that out. And switch some stuff. The one joke where he's in Siberia and he's counting, it should have gone right into them at the beach.
Yeah.
And then him still counting. That would have been hilarious. And it would have been more poignant, and then gone back to the other guys.
Yeah.
That would have been easier to follow. There's just too many times where they go, where it's like priest, them, priest, then priest, then priest, then priest, priest, them.
Yeah.
There's this. They're giving them a lot of time, and then they just go back and forth really, really fast. Like, just take those cuts and like move them back together and make them more streamlined, like the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, just cut it better. That would just do wonders to clean up this film. I think that alone would probably make it a more iconic Mel Brooks film.
Yeah.
Because what makes this thing like stand out so much is it's editorially a mess.
Yeah.
And you can tell that this is something that like is an early Mel Brooks work, because producers suffered from a similar issue. It had some bad cutting and bad things too. This one's just worse.
That's fair. Like, of the two so far, Producers is a much better film in my opinion. This one.
It is.
This isn't a bad film, but
No.
it's not nearly as good
It's
as
just
the Producers.
you can tell it needs. And I think if I remember correctly, Producers, I think Mel Brooks did with somebody else. I don't think he was fully alone on that one. I think he had somebody else he worked with, but I might be wrong. But on this one, I think is the first one he did completely on his own. And you can tell he's floundering a little bit in post.
Yeah.
It suffers quite a bit in post. And unless that's actually where they cut the shots, is where they did the things. But even then, that doesn't excuse it. They should have cut sooner than. Then that just means he wanted to use every bit of film that he filmed, and that's just not good either. Like, you need to cut some of this out. There's a lot of fluff that isn't there. It's like time padding, feels like. They could have cut out of it.
Yeah.
And smoothed it out quite a bit. Like you said, it feels long towards the end of it.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's a lot of moments, like when they're just walking through the woods. It shows them for like 5 minutes, like walking and trudging to Moscow. You spent the entire film quickly showing them getting from place to place. And then suddenly now you're making us walk them to the final moments.
Yeah.
Just seems unnecessary. Why do it now?
Yeah.
I get thematically kind of what they might have been trying to do. Like, you do things like that to make you're like humbling us or letting the audience feel their pain. But it just comes across unnecessary. I didn't get that out of that film.
Yeah, I think that's just an issue with films from the late 60s, early 70s. Is sometimes when you're watching a film, it feels like they're purposely making you feel the pain, but the way that they make you feel the pain is by making a very painful, dry scene.
Yes.
So it's like they have to trudge across the entirety of Russia, and it's such a long journey. It's really causing a strain in them. But as a result, for some reason, the filmmakers in the it's like a late 60s, early 70s thing. When they want to have that, they make the audience feel it, and they punish the audience.
Yeah.
On top of the character.
There's some truth to that, but I've also seen plenty of movies in that same era do it better.
Well, no, I'm not saying it's like
no,
across the board.
No, I mean,
it's very common.
Right. Where they did the punishing thing, but they did it better, so it felt like I was being punished, but for the right reasons. Like, I felt, oh man, those poor characters. This one I was just bored. I didn't feel for them.
Yeah.
Because, like, you guys basically teleported all over Russia. Oh no, you have to walk for once. Oh, boo-hoo. Like, it didn't do. I don't think it did what they meant for it to do.
Yeah. So one thing that I would have done, like, let's say we're making it for a modern audience, I would have probably included a graphic just showing how ridiculous their travels are, and showing them like
Doing the
across
map sequence?
Yeah, like do a map sequence where instead of watching them trudge through the forest, like they have them do like an Indiana Jones thing where it's kind of in the background a little bit that they're trudging through the forest, but it's just showing like, here's where they started on this end of Russia, and now they have to walk all the way across over here for a single chair.
When they say
You know,
3,000 miles and they show 2 scenes of them walking through the woods, it doesn't really have the impact that it should.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. If they had shown the map, that would have given it some scale, and that probably would, literally, that one change probably would have made it feel a little more cinematic to me, because I'd been like, holy crap, look at all the distance they had to travel. But saying 3,000 miles and then them taking 2 scenes to walk through some woods and suddenly they're in Moscow just doesn't really have the same impact.
But also the thing is that we forget the fact they were already in Moscow. So you literally could have the graphic where it's just like they're just backtracking back to Moscow for one chair.
Well, show the whole path. Like, here's the path that they already took, and then you show them having to go all the way back. That would have some scale.
And then you show them like split off where they sent because Siberia is in the middle of nowhere, Russia. They literally sent the priest into the middle of nowhere to die. Like, show that where it's like, meanwhile in Siberia, and you can even do like a text scroll thing where it's
or
just
you
like,
just do the map and you just have him be a different color.
Yeah, exactly.
Just have them going and then have him going way over here.
Yeah.
And then them going back around and then him coming all the way back. That would give a sense of scale. I think it's hard sometimes to realize like just how big Russia is in your head when you're just watching a film.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I really like about maps. And they've done that in films even in that era. Like doing the map thing was not even new then. Like it had been done before.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, especially cinema, say that's a cheap trick, but I don't think so. I think it gives a sense of
it works.
It gives a sense of scale. They do it in The Lord of the Rings, and it does a really good job of showing like just the sense of scale, where they have to go. Like in the beginning of Lord of the Rings, they show the map, and they show all the places they're gonna go. And then you realize the scale, like, and then you see how long it takes them to get to certain places on that map.
Yep.
They don't have to sit there and show them moving the entire time. No. It doesn't matter. They showed the map at the beginning, and then they said, and then you see all the names of the places, and you see where they're going. That's enough. And then just having them move on the map is just an extra little step to remind you, like, how intense this is. It works in films because it helps us understand the sense of scale when it's relevant.
Yeah.
Like you go after the film and then you go look at your phone and go, oh, wow, look, they went here, here, and here, and here. It doesn't have the same impact as if you see it while it's happening.
Right.
And that scene does that.
It's also a good transitionary because you're already doing transitions. You might as well have a moving graphic while you're doing transitions, especially with a modern audience. People make the comment, oh, TikTok generation. But the thing is that we also don't really have this idea of scale like they used to in the 1960s and stuff, because a lot of people in the 1960s had a better understanding of Russia's geography.
Well,
they took more time teaching it.
Some, but even then, like,
but yeah, still.
Even I know the sense of scale in Russia. I know it really well. But seeing graphics in films, it turns that scale into emotion. Yeah. In a way that you don't get if you just have to think about it in your own head. Yeah. It's just different. It hits differently. Every time I see a film where they do the map, it's mesmerizing to see even when they do it badly. They did it in what was the translated Van Helsing.
Van Helsing.
They do the map, and you're like, they don't even do a really good job of it, but it's still, you're just looking at like, holy crap, look how much distance they travel. You feel like they're
traveling a great deal of distance. They're having this great journey. The issue with the Van Helsing thing isn't the graphic. It's the fact that literally they act like it didn't happen at all. Like they don't have a proper understanding of the time scale.
Right.
They're just running the entire time because Transylvanian horses run on gasoline. They have 14 hearts. They don't even stop. They never stopped. And then they teleport back.
Right, but that's the problem. I've had a lot of films doing it poorly.
Yeah.
That can be dangerous. If they had done that in this film poorly, it could have actually backfired. There's a lot of films. Also, they won't show the map because of like distance traveled. In this film, I think it kind of makes it sound like they spent several months like going around, because
it was at least 4 months.
Because by the time they get
chair, they immediately found the chair. They'd been going around for 4 months.
Exactly.
For us, we're like, okay, it's probably been like 3-4 days. And then when they say 4 months, I'm like, oh yeah, they did travel like 3,000 miles.
Exactly.
It wasn't just like up and over a hill. No, it was like we went all the way to the Baltic, and then we came all the way back.
Right. This
like,
is the problem I had with like Shannara Chronicles and things like that, is they'd be like in San Francisco and then a day later they're in New York, and you're like, how in the heck did you on foot travel that far and back again? That's insane. But they didn't show the map, so nobody that works because nobody knows the scale. But if you'd have shown that on a map, it would have hurt it. So you have to be careful with that. But yeah, you put that in a film like this one.
Well, and in the dialogue, they say 4 months.
Yeah.
So the thing is, like, you literally could do a graphic of them walking, and then just like the pages falling off of a calendar.
Yeah.
You know,
that's another cinematic trick that's been done before.
Yeah.
That one's a little tropey, but I don't mind a trope
like,
if it works. Like, give me
something. It works if you're using it for the humor. It's a better humor gag than just they're walking. You know, like, you could even have a thing where he literally, like, pulls out a calendar and, like, crosses off another X. And he's just like, why have you been carrying that for 3 months? You know, I don't really know. We've just been walking.
It's,
you know,
it stints the film. The film was slow to start, and then it starts to move really quick until they're marched back to Moscow. And then there's this weird somber moment where the film's like trying to make you feel their pain, but all it makes me do is like, I don't really feel bad for them. Like, I should. And I think it's because the sense of scale isn't there, and it just doesn't feel like the scenes they go through doesn't make it feel like it's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
3,000 miles. Here's a 3 flash montage. Yeah, that didn't feel like you earned that pain. Like, give me a travel map and the calendar flipping. That would have done it. Holy crap! They just spent especially when they found it 2 months ago. They said, if it had taken them, imagine if it had taken them exactly 2 months to get back to Moscow. 4 months. Right. If it took exactly that time, meaning had they looked for that chair in Moscow, they would have found it first. But because it took them exactly 4 months to make that round trip, they missed their opportunity.
Yeah. Or you even show the fact that maybe the journey took 6 months, and 2 months in was when they found it. But they've been going around for 4 months. So they're just like, seriously, I've been chasing this stupid flipping chair for 4 months, and you already found it? You know?
Yeah, that would have given it a lot. And his emotions, the Marshal emotes like it was a big deal. But that part of the film, I lose connection to the character because I don't feel like it's been as long as it has for him. Yeah. It feels like it's been 5 minutes. It feels like 5 minutes of time has passed, and I don't feel like that anger is earned. But if they had given me a sense of scale there, and I could feel like the time ticking, that would have done it for me. Like, oh yeah, dude, I get why you're mad. You just spent 4 months looking for this chair, and you missed it.
Yeah.
By the amount of time you spent wasting your time on the other chairs.
Right.
And but it doesn't really make that clear.
Yeah, and the thing too is that you can use it as a narrative tool, the map. Like, you literally could have a thing where they're in the records office and they find out that the chairs have already been kind of split up. And so they're just like gaping at this huge map of Russia. And then we zoom in and it's the graphic for us. And it just shows there's a couple of chairs here. There's a couple of chairs here. There's a couple of chairs
that
here.
would have done it.
And then the priest comes in, the dude ducks, and then he sends him to Siberia. And then it's just like a little map. Like, it just like scrolls up Siberia. And that's where the priest is heading. You know, like it's things like that. Like you can use it as a visual gag. The other thing that would have helped too is like have some dialogue that really establishes why they are traveling the way that they're traveling and where they are going. That's a different city. Because I think they only mentioned once, and it's very much in passing why they're near the Baltic at all. They only mention it once. So make it a little bit more clear, clean up the dialogue a little bit. And the other thing is that if you have these quicker transitions between the two characters, you kind of understand the fact that, like, meanwhile, up in Siberia, or meanwhile, like, the guy's getting... because the guy just gets transferred to this other thing. And it's just like, we don't really know enough about the character, so it's like, did you just transfer him for the sake of the story element? Have a little bit of a dialogue thing where it's just like, oh, thank God that we're almost done with this deployment or something like that. Siberia really is the worst. And it explains, like, they're waiting for the order to come in. Then when the order comes in, they're like, oh, we're finally away from that madman. I couldn't stand the howling and the counting and the, you know, like, and then you have...
You're 105.
Yeah, so just... there's a couple of things where dialogue would help. I think mainly, though, like a visual of their journey would have helped.
Some good place setting would have been good, because there are a lot of moments in the film, especially with our ugly and our bads, where cutting and scene placements just get a little rocky because you just kind of lose track of what's going on, and it really could have gained from maps, some gags, better cutting, better visual connections. Would have really, like, and the problem is too, this film would be hard to make today because the Soviet Union is an important backdrop to the story.
Well, the Soviet Union is a lot bigger than just Russia.
Well, yes, and the Soviet Union has been dead for a long time, so it's not like you'd have to do a historical piece if you were to remake it for modern audiences. You'd still have to make it in the Soviet Union, so you'd have to make it like a historical piece.
Yeah.
And that actually could be kind of fun, because this one kind of feels like it takes place. I mean, it was done in 1970. It feels like it was done in like 1950. Like,
it probably was based like right before World War II.
Yeah,
because it's close enough to the Revolution that they're still kind of feeling it, but it's been a minute. It's probably been about 20 years since the Revolution.
Yeah. So even when it was made, it feels like it was still a good bit in the past.
Yeah.
So you could make it, you can modernize this and make it work. You just have to make it a period piece set in the same time frame.
Right.
Like, that would be an important aspect of it. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Absolutely. All right. I think that we've talked this thing to death. We probably spent about as much time on this talking about it as we did watching it. But anyway, yeah, it's a pretty solid movie. So far, not the best in the series. But, I mean, it is Mel Brooks. I think it's worth a watch if you can. This one actually is in the Mel Brooks Blu-ray collection. I think it's called the Mel Brooks Collection. It's by MGM and 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, this was like the first one in the list, right?
Yeah, that's the first one that's actually in that box set. So if you guys want to follow along with the box set, we will specify if we have to rent a movie or if we have to buy a physical copy of a movie in order to do it. But for the most part, we're going to be following along in the Mel Brooks Collection by 20th Century Fox and MGM on Blu-ray. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching this. I hope that you are enjoying this new series where we're following along with Mel Brooks. If you're new to the channel, we also do a similar series with the Universal Monster movies. We've been doing that for a while now. And we also have a series that we just recently started that is following along the Godzilla, the classic Godzilla movies with my other co-host, Pat. Otherwise, we watch new movies every single week, so if you are thinking about maybe going to see a movie in the movie theaters, we probably have an opinion on it. Otherwise, we're kind of taking a little bit of a break from bad movies, but we might be doing something else with bad movies here coming up in the next couple of months. So be sure to subscribe if that interests you at all. Otherwise, we're interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And we hope to see you guys in the next video.
Thank you for watching.